The Gen Z revolutions are spreading like wildfire all over the world right now. They're violently overthrowing governments, demanding real change, and in many cases, succeeding. Now, of course, some snarky boomer always has to poke his head in the comment section, claiming that Gen Z in the West would never do this, desperately trying to cling on to the outdated notion that this generation is soft and lazy. And every time they do this, I have to give them a friendly, well, maybe a not so friendly reminder that this guy right here actually does exist. This generation is reaching a dangerous breaking point, and all of their doubters are about to be proven wrong in spectacular fashion here. A few days ago, some explosive and game-changing legal developments occurred in the trial of Luigi Mangione, the most talked about alleged assassin of this generation. You probably didn't hear about this in the media, and of course they'd want you to forget, so we're not going to let that happen. When all this was going down a little over a year ago now, you probably remember how Mr. Mangione was arrested at a McDonald's where police seized his backpack and found all the incriminating evidence there. The gun, which was the alleged murder weapon, and most notably, the notebook, where he allegedly wrote out his intricate plans, his anger towards the healthcare industry, and all sorts of incriminating evidence. The backpack is a very key piece of evidence for the prosecution, as without it, their case weakens significantly. There's only one slight problem, however. It turns out the police may have seized and searched the backpack illegally when they arrested him. And if it turns out that's the case, well, this whole thing is about to get very, very interesting. The Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states that in the United States, people have the right to be protected from unreasonable searches and seizures of their property. Any search or seizure requires an explicit search warrant to be issued by a judge. If it's deemed that the criminal evidence was obtained illegally and violated the individual's Fourth Amendment rights, the entire thing could be ruled inadmissible in court. And in this case, that would mean the gun, the notebook, all the incriminating writings, and sure, you might know they exist, but you wouldn't be able to actually use it in a court of law. Now, before we continue, let's establish an important caveat here. I am not a legal professional or expert in any way, shape, or form. I don't know the law the way I know history, economics, how BS the system is, and all the other stuff we like to cover on this channel. I have done a lot of research to be as accurate as possible, but as possible I might get some things wrong here, and so if a legal expert wants to correct me in the comments, I'm more than humble enough to listen. With how polarizing and explosive this case has been from the very start, finding an actual objective, unbiased opinion from legal experts has been a challenge to say the least. So I'll give you my best shot at giving you a perspective from both sides. Unfortunately, it's definitely not as simple as the fact that the police didn't have a warrant and therefore the search was illegal. There are exceptions, including if there is ample probable cause, and in such an explosive nationwide manhunt, they're simply not going to be expected to get a warrant first. That's what the law says according to the prosecutors anyways, and it seems that the judge agrees with this, as she has just ruled that the backpack was in fact seized legally. But she did just order another hearing on whether or not the backpack is admissible evidence. Why? Well, it turns out that while, yes, they may have seized the backpack itself illegally, that doesn't necessarily mean they had the right to search the contents of the backpack legally. For example, if you suspect that someone may be a violent criminal, sure, as law enforcement, you may have the right to seize their backpack to make sure they don't pull out a gun and shoot you, but that doesn't give you the right to necessarily go through the contents of the bag itself after you've already seized it out of their possession without a warrant. Now, the argument the police are trying to make is that supposedly they were justified in doing this because they suspected the backpack might contain a bomb. And I'm not gonna lie, this just sounds like desperate grasping for straws at this point. I mean, the defense has already poked so many holes in this pretty weak argument. First off, the behavior of the officers at the scene doesn't indicate that they suspect there's a bomb in the bag at all. There are protocols you follow. When you suspect a bomb threat, you evacuate the civilians in the area. You call for a bomb squad. You certainly don't just stick your hand in a bag reaching for a bomb when a slight movement in the wrong direction could literally detonate the whole thing. Beyond that, however, there's an even bigger problem with the whole bomb argument, which this article brilliantly points out. even if the officer had been concerned about a bomb, that was an unreasonable concern. Mangione was suspected of a shooting, not a bombing. Law enforcement does not get to point at a person, decide they are dangerous, and search their property based on overbroad fears completely incongruous with suspected content. Such a precedent would not only overhaul the constitutional protections each and every one of us are entitled to, but it would also endorse bias in low-income over police communities of color. From beginning to end, it appears as if the Pennsylvania police just totally cut corners in their usual protocol in an effort to get an arrest in such a high-profile case as soon as possible. And it appears as if the claim of an impending bomb threat was an attempt to retroactively cover their tracks rather than an actual legitimate fear of any real bomb. But just to be fair, the same article does mention that despite all this, it's going to be a challenge for the defense to get the evidence thrown out because of a little rule where judges can actually allow illegally searched evidence to be admitted if it's deemed that they would have legally obtained it anyways. Mangione's suppression issue has one fatal flaw, a legal principle known as the inevitable discovery doctrine, which allows judges to forgive unconstitutional searches if that evidence would have been lawfully discovered anyways. Mangione's defense team will struggle to argue that his arrest for providing a false ID to the police would not have led to the inevitable search of his backpack incident to the arrest. Now, up until this point, I've just been laying out the facts objectively without giving my own personal opinion on it, as I believe it's always important to do that. But some of you might be curious about my personal opinion at this point, so I'll quickly lay it out. As far as what I think will actually happen, I personally think, just like with everyone else, the legal system is rigged and corrupt enough that it's more likely than not that the judge will end up allowing the evidence to be admissible in court. Though far from a guarantee, which is why she's allowing a new hearing about it. But I do think that in the less likely event that the evidence gets thrown out, the defense has far more to gain. Most of the hard evidence, including the murder weapon and the motive, were seized in the backpack. And if it can be proven that that was done illegally, well, it's going to be that much harder to get a definitive, unanimous guilty verdict from the jury. Of course, there's other evidence the prosecution could point to, including DNA found at the scene of the crime, but without a weapon or motive, that only proves that he was there. It doesn't necessarily prove that he committed the crime. It's a busy street in New York City. Hundreds, if not thousands of people walk by every single day and probably leave traces of their DNA in that area too. That's just my opinion anyways, and we'll see if the defense agrees and makes the same argument should they succeed in their quest to get the backpack thrown out as evidence. It's probably still a long shot, but the chances are growing. This, however, is not the only way, or even the most probable way Luigi Mangione could get away with this alleged murder. There's a much easier way and more likely way that this could happen, and it's called jury nullification. Hey guys, you may have noticed we're getting very close to 50,000 subscribers now. This has always been a huge milestone in our eyes, so if you're new here and enjoying this content, definitely consider subscribing and helping us get closer to this big magic number. Thanks a bunch, you guys are the best.
Let's say Luigi Mangione, he has a criminal case, assuming he did it and that is him in the video. If he pleads not guilty and the jury all believes that he did it too, do they decide, hey, we're still not going to convict him because we're okay with his actions? If that happens, that is totally okay. It is not something that a court will overturn and say, look, he did it. What do you mean, jury? Jury nullification is part of our American civil and criminal justice system. Jury nullification essentially means that the jury decides the law was violated, but they don't care. It is not the taboo thing that you might think it is. Jury nullification. Boo! Prosecutors get worried about jury nullification because they want the jury to follow the law and convict. But jury nullification isn't something that's generally planned. What really happens is the jury, who's independent, who's honest, who's reliable, who is willing to follow the law, when they sit and take the oath, they start to hear things and they go, this isn't exactly what I thought it was. If y'all don't know who Dr. Kevorkian is, he was someone who would help people commit assisted suicide, end their lives. But the government doesn't allow that. Those jurors that got picked for his trials, which I believe there were 4 of them, fact check me in the comments here. 3 times in a row, he was found not guilty because the jury said, we don't think that should be a crime. During the 60s and 70s, white people were charged with crimes against black people. All white juries said, yeah, that guy did it, but we're not going to convict him. That's jury nullification. Jury nullification is not something that is routine or common, but it happens. It isn't a cloak and dagger, mysterious, crazy thing. It's something that just naturally happens, and our system allows for it. If the jury finds a criminal defendant not guilty, even if they didn't follow the law, the case is over.
After watching this video, I just gotta say, you learn something new every day, don't you? Now, like a lot of you, I also heard about jury nullification for the very first time after this incident occurred. And at first I thought it was some secret backroom deal where the jury has to collude together behind closed doors and conspire to reach a non-guilty verdict, even though they did think he committed the crime. But it turns out, though, it's actually a hell of a lot more simple than that. It turns out they can straight up just be like, yeah, we think he committed a crime, but hey, we think that it was justified in this situation, and so we're going to find him not guilty. If the jury ultimately reaches this conclusion, there's absolutely nothing the judge, court, or prosecutor can do about it. They're not going to overturn the verdict, demand a new jury, or go through a bunch of lengthy appeals. He walks away a free man on that day, and legally speaking, the case is closed. It's one of the most controversial and powerful quirks of the American legal system, and in a case this polarizing, it is the ultimate wild card to keep your eye on. Now, unlike the issue of the backpack and the search warrant, the potential for jury nullification is a real possibility that legal experts from both sides have acknowledged. The public reaction to the aftermath of the incident wasn't your typical, this is wrong, violence is never the answer, cliches. People were viscerally and surprisingly supportive. All over social media, outrage and elation poured in. Millions of people aired their grievances and shared their horror stories about the American healthcare system, and the overwhelming and unexpected public reaction caught everyone off guard, even the prosecution, especially the prosecution. And because of that, most legal experts from both sides have acknowledged that jury nullification is a serious possibility and a major thorn in the side of the prosecution that they are going to have to deal with. This is made even trickier by the fact that in a criminal trial, the jury must reach a unanimous 12 out of 12 guilty verdict to get a successful conviction. If even 1 out of the 12 objects, it's a hung jury. And as this comment put it perfectly, finding 12 people who haven't been screwed over by the American healthcare system is going to be really difficult. Have they gotten to a point where they have made one too many enemies? We'll find out at the trial later this year. So I'm going to go off on a limb here and say that this overall meta reaction was only possible because of Gen Z. And this is what Gen Z in the West has in common with the revolutionary Gen Z protests going on all over the world right now. After being mocked for years as the sensitive snowflake generation who can't stop scrolling on social media, Gen Z has officially flipped the script, using their social media prowess to rapidly influence real change and progress all over the world. Whether it's exposing the horrors of the American healthcare system or the corruption of third world dictatorships, this rapid, blinding speed that information spreads on the internet now is uniquely and specifically Gen Z. This generation has reached a level of frustration where I've actually personally been criticized for not being radical enough in my previous videos. And after reading your comments, I get it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lecture you from a high horse. I'm a 35-year-old YouTuber, and it's not fair for me to tell a bunch of 18 to 25-year-old young men to risk their lives or their futures. That's just not my place. I've always hated it when older generations force young men with their whole lives ahead of them to fight and die in their wars. And so I'm just not going to become one of them myself. But what I will be is brutally honest and objective and acknowledge why the non-violence talk is falling on deaf ears. There is a massive, growing feeling that the social contract is broken. Young people look at a peaceful protest with a cute little hashtag on a cardboard sign, and they feel like it wouldn't have done a single thing to actually change the healthcare system or anything for that matter. That is just how scary and dangerous things have become We're at a point where people aren't just angry, they're looking at these extreme events and seeing them as the only time the status quo actually stops to listen. That is the uncomfortable reality we're living in now. A world where people feel like the quote unquote right way to change things has become completely fake, performative, and ultimately useless. Now, Gen Z has also been finding many other, more creative ways to escape the matrix and fight back against this broken system. And we cover one of these creative discoveries in depth in this video right here. Check it out. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.